I'd like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to microsoft.com/webcasts. Thanks again for joining us for today's presentation, an overview of manageability in Microsoft SQL Server 2008. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Dan Jones, who's the lead program manager at Microsoft. Dan, you now have the floor. Dan, are you there?
Here I am. Sorry, I was on mute. So welcome everybody to hear about manageability features in SQL Server 2008. SQL Server 2008 is going to launch in February of next year, February 27th. We're going to do a launch event with Windows Server 2008 and Visual Studio 2008. We expect that the final release of the product will be available shortly after that launch event. Leading up to the launch event, we're going to have many events like this webcast, as well as attendance at many industry conferences. So you have lots of opportunity to learn about the features coming in 2008. A little bit about myself. My name is Dan Jones. I am a lead program manager on the SQL Server team responsible for the area of manageability. Prior to Microsoft, I spent 8 years in enterprise IT at a Fortune 50 company, working on various mainframe, client-server, e-commerce, and BI applications. I spent some time at a couple of startups in the BI space as well as in the software development tool space. And I've been at Microsoft for 3 years, all of my time in SQL Server. My areas of responsibility are SQL Server Agent, DBMail, SQL CMD, the shell experience in Management Studio, and a new feature we're releasing in 2008 called Declarative Management. So the goal of this presentation today is to introduce you to these new features we're releasing in 2008, features focused on manageability. And what I want you to take away is to understand that these features are really for everyone, regardless of the size of your IT shop, whether you're a small business, medium, large, or an enterprise. These features will really have something in store for you. And finally, I really want to stress that we are making tremendous investment in the area of manageability. Lowering total cost of ownership for SQL Server is something we talk about and think about every day. And so in terms of investing in features, manageability gets a large portion of that investment because we know it goes right down to the day-to-day operations and administration of the environment. Here's the agenda for today. There's 7 items we'll touch on. 6 of them are product features. The first one is I want to go over a few slides on manageability trends. These are things that we see happening out in the industry that impact DBAs, DBAs managing data environments. And there are a whole bunch of forces that make the environment a lot more complex. And as we look at those trends, we're building features into the product that address those trends head on. The other 6 bullet points are new features coming in 2008. We'll go through each of those individually, and we'll do a couple of demos as well. So let's jump right into it. So the first trend we see out there that's affecting manageability is sort of an obvious one, but it really hits close to home. And that's every time we release SQL Server, we add new features to the product. New features equals new ways to use the product. New ways to use the product means that there's more knobs or configuration options in the product. There's more syntax, new T-SQL syntax you have to learn. And that just all leads to more things that you as an admin have to know. The previous slide was the features that we added in 2005. This slide is a set of features that are going into 2008. These aren't just manageability features. These are across the board on the product. Every single one of these features has some sort of configuration facet or element to it, something that you're going to have to learn as an administrator. If you're a developer, it's something as a developer you want to take advantage of these new features. You have to understand how the feature is used, how to leverage it in your application, and then your administrators are going to have to learn how to configure that in a production environment, how to ensure that you're using it in the way that we intended it to use it, that it's secure, that it's being as performant as possible. The other thing that's important here with this trend of new features is we are on our 3-year release cycle with SQL Server. We had a long stint between SQL 2000 and 2005, 2008 is coming, it feels very fast for many of us, but it's going to be a 3-year release cycle, and that's our goal moving forward, is a release within every 3 years. This just means that you're going to have more versions of the product in your environment, and you're going to have a more rapid pace with releases, new features that you're going to have to keep up with. The second trend is data center and server consolidation. HP has made it public that they're going from 80 some odd data centers worldwide to 8. This means that there's going to be a massive consolidation, both data center-wise, server-wise, as well as staff-wise. They're not going to maintain the same staff that managed 80 data centers and shove them into 8 data centers. They're going to reduce staff. This means that there's going to be more applications running on each server. Each data center is going to house more mission and business critical applications and servers. And the bottom line is it's a more complex environment to manage. This means that as an administrator, the environment that you're going to have to deal with is going to be far more complex, whether it's just more applications running in a data center or more applications running on individual servers, whether that's multiple instances of SQL Server running on one multi-proc machine, or whether you're utilizing virtualization technology to run multiple OSs on a multi-proc machine. These are all things that add to the complexity of managing the data environment. And as administrators, you're going to have to scale with this. You're going to have to manage more databases, more instances, more applications. The final trend that we see impacting manageability is remote and embedded databases. While we see the consolidation happening in the data center at the enterprise level, there's still a large amount of data residing out at branch offices. I was talking to one customer that manages chain restaurants across the U.S. So they're a holding company. They have 1,500 restaurants across the U.S. Each restaurant has a kiosk, has multiple kiosks to enter orders into. The server takes your order at the table. They go back, they enter it in. Each one of those kiosks is running an instance of SQL Server. In the back room of the restaurant, there's another server that the kiosks upload to that server. It stores the data, and then on a nightly basis, it uploads it to the corporate office. Well, you figure 1,500 stores times 3 to 5 instances per store, you're talking on the order of about 5,000 to 7,000 instances of SQL Server out there. They have 3 DBAs centrally located at the corporate headquarters. They don't have DBAs sitting out at each of the restaurants. So their ability to manage the environment remotely, to ensure that each environment is configured per their corporate policy, is absolutely critical. If something goes down or there's a performance problem, they need to know about it immediately because that could affect the performance of the restaurant. Also, it's a mobile workforce. So with SQL Server Express and with SQL Server Compact Edition, we're finding more and more data residing out on mobile devices, whether it's a laptop or it's a cell phone. It's a weekly occurrence. We hear of somebody having their laptop stolen. It has sensitive data. The question is that data vulnerable or not? Well, unless as an administrator you have the tools in place to ensure that the laptop is locked down or the phone is locked down, and moreover that the data residing on the phone or the laptop is configured in compliance with the company's data handling policies, if you don't have the tools to do that, how do you sleep at night? How do you ensure that your users aren't circumventing the system that you have at hand? So these 3 trends are what drove this set of features that I'm going to walk you through today. We hope that those trends resonate with you, they resonate with myself, they resonate with my team, and certainly the customers that we've talked to over the last 18 months as we've been in planning and development for 2008, it's resonated with them. The first feature I want to walk you through is declarative management. You'll also hear this referred to as DMF, or Declarative Management Framework. I want to start this with a quick demonstration to give you kind of a taste or a flavor of what declarative management is about. We label this intelligent monitoring. And the scenario is that we have an application deployed on a server, And we've locked down the DBO schema in that server. We don't want people creating tables or views or stored procedures in the DBO schema. Well, today you have some tools available to you to do that. You could restrict security to the DBO schema. You could put triggers on the creation or altering of various objects to monitor the DBO schema. Those are all things that you have at hand. But we're going to offer an out-of-box solution that allows you to manage this in a more robust and straightforward manner. So I'm going to bring up Management Studio. This is our GUI environment. And I have my registered servers up here. I have Object Explorer here. To show you where we're storing policies, there's a management node in Object Explorer, and I can expand that. And we've introduced a new node there, which is Policy Management. Here's where all my policies reside. All the ones with the little red arrow down mean they're disabled on the system. Some of these policies you're seeing here correspond to best practice policies. We just released the Best Practice Analyzer for SQL Server 2005. You can download that from downloads.microsoft.com. Moving forward, we're going to bring those best practices into the product as policies so you can monitor your system real time on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And in some cases, you'll be able to set up those best practices to prevent changes to the system. I have a policy on the system that prevents the usage of the DBO schema. So I'm going to attempt to create a table here in the DBO schema. And it's going to go out and fail. Uh-oh, what happened? Well, it tells me that some policy has been violated by this transaction and that it's rolled back my transaction. The policy description is, this policy controls the usage of the DBO schema, standard practices to create tables in an application or user-specific schema. Now, my policy administrator controlled that message. They also controlled where I should go to get more help. So when they set up the policy, they provided a description, and they gave me a pointer where to go to get more help. So if I didn't know about this policy, I can go to some URL or it could be a mail to link, and I could go get more help to understand why I shouldn't create objects in the DBO schema. Just for completeness sake, let's go ahead and create a table, and we'll put it in an app-specific schema, my application-specific schema. And there you go, the table creates. We didn't violate the policy. If we wanted to take a quick look at the policy, I have my, let me find it, controlled DBO schema usage. We can bring up our policy dialog and take a look at this policy. So it's controlling the usage of the DBO schema. I'll bring up my condition to check for, and it's just checking that schema is not equal to DBO. So it'll allow me to create objects in any schema other than DBO. I could add in additional clauses here if there were other things I wanted to check about the table, or constrain it from being created in other schemas. It's going to run against all tables and all databases on all servers. And then finally, it's going to run when changes are attempted, and it's going to prevent out of compliance. There's other modes that I could run the policy in, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. But let's jump back to the presentation. All right, so you got a little taste of declarative management in that demo. Declarative management is really about a policy-based management framework for the database engine. In SQL Server 2008, our focus will be on the database engine. Beyond 2008, we'll look to move to analysis servers and reporting servers and integration services. To think about this, think about how group policy simplified the management of the operating system environment. You know, before Microsoft came out with group policy and ISVs or third parties came out with a similar policy-based framework, managing the OS environment in the enterprise was very, very difficult. You had numerous custom scripts that would run at startup to do various configuration checking. When group policy came out, it eliminated the need for all those custom scripts and custom solutions. You had a way to define what your intent was for the OS configuration and ensure that servers and desktops out in your environment complied with that intent. We're trying to bring the same environment to the data environment. and doing that in a very highly integrated manner. So there's 3 key points about declarative management. One, management by intent. It's really raising the level of abstraction that you manage the server at. So today you manage at a very physical level. What's my schema? What drive are my data files on? What drive are my log files on? Well, there's a level above that that's more of a logical level. So today, if you had a policy in your environment, which we see many customers do, that says for your database, your log files and your data files need to be on separate drives, you could certainly write a script that checked for that. You would go check the data files, see what drive they're on. You'd go check the log files, see what drive they're on, and you do a compare against those two. But you would have to code that up yourself. What if there was a property on the database that said, true or false, log files and data files are on different drives? That property is a logical property. With declarative management, we're going to provide a set of these logical properties. Over time, we'll allow you to create your own logical properties. So you can create a new property, a new knob on a database that maps to some physical knobs. Where are my data files? Where are my log files? What's my database collation versus what's the collation of the master? And you can encapsulate some business logic in there. The next area is intelligent monitoring. So I'm going to establish my intent. I want my log files and data files to be on different drives. So I'm going to monitor this property to see that it's true that they are on different drives. And then there's different modes that I can check that property under. I can prevent changes. So if somebody attempts to create a data file on the same drive as a log file, we would prevent that case. Or I could monitor that case. I could monitor it real time so that as soon as somebody creates data files on the same drive as a log file, I'll let them do that, but I want some alert back to me that this happened. Whether that alert comes through Management Studio or it comes through an integration with System Center, you can still get an alert that somebody violated your policy. And then the third way to monitor would be per a schedule. Similar to a SQL Server agent job, you can monitor policies on schedule. So you could have a set of auditing policies that run every week or every month or every quarter, record the results. Is the system in or out of compliance? If it's out of compliance, where is it out of compliance? And what is it out of compliance with? And then generate a series of audit reports from that information. This is all great if you can do it on one server, but very few of our customers have only one server. So we're introducing with declarative management what we call virtualized management. This is the ability to group similar servers together. So you could create n number of groups, n deep. You can group those like servers together, group them by similar configuration. Here are all my dev servers. Here are all my departmental servers. Here are all of my mission critical servers. And then you can target those servers with groups of policies. So for your development environment, you have a group of policies that identify what the right configuration is for development servers. And then you can push that set of policies to all the servers that are in the development group, similar to the way that Active Directory does it. I'll note that we are not using, in this release, we're not using the Active Directory or group policy foundation. We are using SQL Server. At some point in the future, we'll allow you to choose between either mechanism for distributing policies. But in 2008, it's going to be limited to just the database engine. And then the focus of all this is really about reducing total cost of ownership. So let's see another quick demo. There's two things I want to show you in this demo. The first one is monitoring specific DDL changes to the environment. So this is, we saw in the previous demo how you can prevent a table from being created. In this demo, I'll show you the creation of a stored procedure that violates a policy, but we'll let that procedure still get created. And then we'll show how we do reporting on policy compliance. So you'll see how the UI in Management Studio is going to light up when there's a violation of a policy. So I have another policy on my system, which is that stored procedures should execute as caller, and this policy is enabled on the system. I'm going to go back over to my script here, And I'm going to just create this goofy little stored procedure that just does select that version, nothing interesting there. But what is interesting about this is I'm going to set it up to execute as owner. So I'm going to knowingly violate that policy. Now in this case, I'm going to allow the stored procedure to be created, but we're going to execute the policy behind the scenes, and we're going to make a determination whether or not this stored procedure complies or violates the policy. And then we're going to record those results, and you'll see how Object Explorer is going to light up because I know that this is going to violate my policy. So let's go ahead and create that procedure. Our procedure was created. If I do a quick refresh over here on Object Explorer, I'll open up OE details as well, you'll see that there's a new icon sitting in Object Explorer. This is our policy icon, but it has a red circle with an X through it. This tells me that there's something wrong with this data, with something in my databases. I can drill down to locate exactly which database is the problem. I can drill into stored procedures, and there's a stored procedure that I created, and it's painted with the violation. Now I can go in and I can look at, okay, what was the problem with this stored procedure? If I jump back really quick to the policy on this stored procedure, I can view the history on the policy and look at the details. And it tells me that the execution context for this should be caller, and the actual value is owner. Also provides me some additional description on the policy, and I can get a link out to some best practices that relate to this policy. There's a whole bunch of additional capability here that I didn't demo for you today. Declarative management is available in the June CTP. Everything I showed you today, you can demo there. There's another CTP of SQL Server 2008 that will be coming shortly. There is no functional change in declarative management in that CTP. All right, let's move along. Resource Governor. Resource Governor is about ensuring that important applications or users have the necessary resources available. I'm sure all of us have been in the situation where we receive a call, maybe it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it's during the day or during lunch, that a user says, hey, I need to run this report, this critical report for my boss, the CIO or the CFO, and it's just sitting here spinning. You log on to the server, you do some investigation, and you find out that somebody has issued a query from Excel or from some query tool, and they've done a 28-table join, and it's doing full table scans, and it's brought the system to its knees. And now your important user or your important application can't get access to the resources necessary to complete its task. This is what Resource Governor addresses. This is a scenario. So if we turn our attention to the little graphic on the right-hand side there, you'll see that request 1 of n is coming in. And it's coming into what we call a classifier or a user-defined function. Think of this as a big switch statement. It's looking at the metadata for the connection, and it's making a determination of where this should go, where this connection should go. Now, you control the UDF. So you can look at any information in the connection that you want to decide whether this is an ad hoc request and so it should go over into this group, or this is a request from our main application and it should go into this group. The job of the UDF is to partition those connections into groups. The groups are associated with what we call resource pools. It's the resource pool that defines the maximum and minimum and/or minimum available memory and/or CPU available to that pool, and hence to that group that utilizes that pool. So as a connection comes in, it's going to get sorted to a group. That group is associated with pool, and that defines how much memory and how much CPU is available to that pool. It won't use more than it's allocated, or it won't drop down to below a certain allocation. And you have complete configuration over what those allocations are. So in our example, we can take our main application, we can put it in its own group using the metadata in the connection. So if you populate the application name in the connection metadata, we can take all the requests from that application, put it in its own group, and make sure that it has the resources available to it. Whereas we could take Excel or other ad hoc query tools, we can scrutinize the connection information on those, put them into another group that has less resources available to it. This way we don't get called at 3 o'clock in the morning or called during our lunch hour, and the person's request will go through per sort of the priority of that request. Now there's a whole monitoring environment for this as well. So there's new perfmon counters and there's new DMVs that will allow you to monitor the usage of the pools. Also, the full management of this environment is surfaced in Management Studio, and it'll be surfaced in SMO, which is our SQL Manageability objects. So if you wrote a managed application, you could manage the resource governor as well. The next feature is something we call All Actions Audited. Now, All Actions Audited is not about capturing before and after snapshots of data and doing the comparison and looking at a column by column or row by row level of what has changed in the data, but rather it's capturing who is making changes to the data, when are they making those changes, and kind of generically what data are they changing. So they inserted a row to this particular table or they updated a row in this particular table. You set up a new object in the system called an audit object. That's that big box in the middle that says audit. What that object defines is where should I log to? You have 3 choices of where to log. You can log to a file. That file could be local on the server or it could be out on a file share. You can log to the application event log, so the Windows application event log, or you could log to the Windows security log. So those are your 3 choices of where you want to log. Creation of and altering of an audit object is controlled, so there's new permissions in the system, alter any audit, create any audit. Within the audit object, you add what are called audit specifications. It's the audit specification that identifies specifically what events, what actions, on what objects, by what users you want to monitor. So you could monitor every action against a particular table or in a particular schema. You could audit actions only on particular tables, and you could do it only for specific users. So if application users you didn't want to audit, but you wanted to audit admin users, you could set it up to do that. An audit object can have multiple audit specifications. This just allows you to capture different types of transactions in the system and write them to the same audit location. You can have multiple audit objects. So if you wanted to audit certain types of events or actions to one file and other types of events or actions to another file, you can do that. As with Resource Governor, there's a full UI around this. That UI will surface in Management Studio. And we've also extended SMO so that you have a managed API that you can use to administer this feature as well. I will note in the upcoming CTP that we haven't released yet, but we'll release something shortly on that. The Resource Governor will be in that CTP. All actions audited, it will not be in that CTP. All actions audited will not be in that CTP as well. So these will be in a subsequent CTP. The next feature I want to talk about is something we call Performance Studio. You'll also hear this referred to as data collectors. This is a framework that ties together collection, analysis, troubleshooting, and persistence of database engine diagnostic data. So there's a tool that we ship in SQL Server 2005 called SQL Diag. It's a tool that you can run, and it'll monitor your environment and collect various performance-related data about your environment. Performance Studio and Data Collectors is sort of like SQL Diag on steroids. It'll allow you to set up these data collections, these high-performance data collectors. They run in memory. And what these collectors can do is you can point them at various perfmon counters, you can point them at a DMV, or you can have it run any raw T-SQL that you want it to run. You set up the data collectors to run on a schedule. So I want to collect data from this DMV every 5 seconds, or every 5 minutes, or every 5 hours. The data collector is running in memory. It's collecting this data per that schedule, and it's storing it in memory. You have a second schedule that says, now, every hour or every half hour or every 10 minutes, I want to take all the data that's been collected in memory and I want to write it out to a data warehouse. So now you have the ability to collect this data real time in memory for some schedule and then dump it out to a warehouse and store it in a warehouse. The warehouse scheme is public, so you can write your own reports. We'll also have a series of out-of-box reports. You could take the data from the warehouse and create an analysis services cube or create a robust reporting environment using reporting services. You could extend the schema of the warehouse to include data from your configuration management database or any other data from your environment. In addition, this warehouse can reside on a separate server. So you can have data collectors running out on servers in your enterprise or in your environment, 5 servers, 10 servers, 100 servers, and you can all have them pumping data back to a central warehouse. So now you have one place to do that reporting. In SQL Server 2008, the emphasis is going to be on data collection and reporting. There'll be some pretty robust reports surfacing in Management Studio. You'll be able to enhance those reports. We look at this as the foundation that beyond SQL Server 2008, as you record this operational history, this history over time, that we'll be able to deliver troubleshooting and tuning wizards that leverage that historical data, and that information would be integrated also in with the policy system. So you could write policy against the historical data so that if you see a blip or a valley on a particular performance counter or a particular DMV, you could use policy to monitor that and take some type of corrective action automatically or create some type of warning to you. All right, Windows PowerShell integration. So Windows PowerShell is a new command line shell and scripting language for system administration and management. It's a Windows component. It's available as a download for Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 2K3, or Windows 2003. What we're going to do in SQL Server 2008 is we're going to release a SQL provider along with some out-of-box, what the PowerShell folks call commandlets for common actions, such as scripting. So I'm going to advance here and get some screenshots. So what you're looking at on this screenshot, this is a command shell. I dropped into PowerShell, and I dropped into a SQL Server folder. So I CD'd into SQL Server, and I did a dir. And what that did for me was it listed the local instances on my machine. I had 2 instances running. I can CD into one of those instances. I can CD into databases and do a dir against databases and list out all the databases that are on that instance. So I'm using standard shell commands, dir, cd, etc. And I'm navigating the instance of SQL Server just like I would the file system. From here, you can build a set of robust scripts to do various administrative tasks for you. This is going to be focused to the database engine in SQL Server 2008. Beyond 2008, we'll look at supporting analysis services as well. Under the covers, it's using SMO, so the SQL management objects. So as we add new features to the product and we add those features to SMO, they automatically will show up in PowerShell, and you can start scripting against them right away. If I advance here, you can do filtering. So here, the screenshot on the bottom there, I did a dir on the databases directory, but I piped that through a where clause. And what I was interested in was where system object is equal to 1. So is system object as a property within SMO? the value of 1 means it's a system object. The value of 0 means it's not a system object. So all the properties that are available in SMO are available to me in PowerShell, and I can do actions based on those properties. So I get a listing of my system databases. For example, if I CD'd into AdventureWorks and then I CD'd into tables, I could do a dir on the collection of tables and get all the tables in AdventureWorks, or I could pass that through a filter and only show those tables that are in the sales schema, and that's what you're seeing here. I could filter on create date, I could filter on name, I could filter on row count. So the possibilities are endless. This is a very, very robust environment for doing scripting. All right, T-SQL IntelliSense. So IntelliSense is one of those features that has been on the wish list for a long time. We're going to finally make it a reality in SQL Server 2008. Prior to now, or today, for 2005, you can buy third-party tools that give you an IntelliSense flavor within their editor. We're going to bring IntelliSense to Management Studio. This is going to operate the same way IntelliSense operates in Visual Studio. So if you type select star from AdventureWorks dot, you'll get a list of all the objects, all the schema in AdventureWorks. You can select the human resource schema. When you hit a dot again, you'll get a list of all the objects in the human resource schema. Now, whenever I talk about this, the first question everybody has is, well, what if I have a lot of tables? How is performance going to be? Well, when we started this feature, we went out looking for the top talent out there around language parsing, and we were able to capture one of the top guys out there for language parsing. And so we brought him onto the team, and he's been working on this feature now for about 9 months, and it rocks. It's truly amazing what they're able to do. Not only do you get IntelliSense when you hit the dot, but if you bring up a script for a stored procedure or a table or a view, the language parser within Management Studio is going to parse your script. Everywhere where it finds a word it doesn't know or something out of context, it's going to put the little red squiggly under it. Kind of what you get in Microsoft Word when you misspell a word. You get that little red squiggly. And then when you hover over it, it'll give you some information about this variable hasn't been declared, this keyword isn't recognized. Whatever your syntax error or semantic error might be, it'll capture all those and report back for you what those are. In Management Studio, you can display the error tool window. Those errors, the red squigglies, will also show up there. So you'll get a whole list of all the errors in your environment. Double-click on one of those errors and it'll jump you to that spot in the script. So this is a tremendous productivity enhancer for Management Studio. All right, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, so I have just a couple of more slides. I'm going to wrap up, and I will stay on for as long as necessary to get through your questions. Basically, what I wanted you to come away with today is that manageability is a key area of investment for us with this release. Each one of the features I showed you, we could do a couple of hour session on it in and of its own. We're continuing the trend within SQL Server on targeting total cost of ownership and reducing total cost of ownership. If we rewind the clock 15 years ago, the total cost of ownership stack had hardware as number 1, software as number 2, and people as number 3. That meant that hardware was the most expensive component of having a system in your environment. Software was the second most expensive, and people were the third most expensive. Well, 15 years later, that stack has flipped. People are now the most expensive, software is number 2, hardware is number 3. Hardware is a commodity item, it's cheap. What we're going after is how do we make administrators, DBAs, system administrators, developers more productive with our tool set? How can they leverage the power of the features that we're releasing every release in a more efficient and graceful manner? And finally, these features aren't targeted at the most extreme enterprise only, and they're not targeted at the 1 or 2 person shop only. Each of these features is done in a way that it allows the 1 and 2 person shop to leverage them, whether it's Resource Governor or Declarative Management or T-SQL IntelliSense. Those are all valid features for a small shop. They're equally valid for an enterprise. So we provide the instrumentation, whether it's monitoring DMVs, whether it's pushing policies out on scale. In an enterprise environment, these features shine as well. So I'll leave this slide up just for a second. Here are some additional resources, including a shameless plug to my blog. I focus my blog on SQL Server Manageability. Don't get to blog as much as I like, but as the release nears, I'll be blogging more and more about the manageability features. Also out on blogs.msdn.com, there are a number of SQL Server blogs. So within the SQL Server group, there's a number of people that blog. If you go out there and do a search on SQL Server, you'll hit no less than probably 28,000 postings. So I'm sure you'll find something interesting. Connect with some blogger who hits a space that you're passionate about. And I mean, after all, with 28,000 postings, you're going to need something to do with all your time that you're going to have on your hands after you move to 2008. With Resource Governor, Declarative Management, Performance Studio, PowerShell, All Actions Audited, those are doing a whole bunch of heavy lifting for you. For more information on SQL Server 2008, you can go out to Microsoft.com. Also, there's forums out on MSDN that are dedicated to SQL Server 2008. The SQL Server 2005 forums are still out there. It's a great place to go ask questions and get help. Folks from the product group, from the SQL Server team, we monitor those forums. In addition, our SQL Server MVPs monitor those forums. So terrific place to go get your questions answered. If you have feedback on the product, you download the June CTP, you have some questions, you have some suggestions on how we could make a feature a little bit better, MS Connect is a great place to go. You go out to MS Connect, you can enter in what your feedback is, you can search other people's feedback and vote. So if there's some feature out there that I really want this and there's 82 votes, you can add your vote to it as well. All that information comes to us, directly to us in the product group. It goes right into our work item tracking database, and we see it, and we see that it came from Connect, and we see the votes on it. And then we have an ability to respond back to you. So we have some metrics here on getting back to people, within a couple of days, help you through your problem, or respond to your suggestion. Where we're at in a development cycle for 2008, it's a great time to provide your feedback on the features that you're seeing in the CTPs. We take that feedback to heart, we scrutinize it, we debate it, and some of it makes the product, some of it doesn't, some of it will look towards the next release. But it's a great vehicle for you to give us feedback. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather. I think she has a survey for you guys.
Yes, thanks a lot, Dan. I'd also like to remind everyone that if you do have any questions for Dan, you can go ahead and submit those now using the questions and answers pane in the lower right-hand corner of your interface. Also, you do have the option to print a PDF copy of this deck, which is a good way to get all of those resources. You can just go up to the File menu and select the Print to PDF option. Now I will go ahead and launch our evaluation for today. You should be seeing it showing up in your slide area. All you need to do to fill out the survey is click on those links that you see in the middle of the screen. And we do appreciate all the feedback that you leave for us. We read all your comments, so please do take a moment to give us that feedback and help us to improve our future webcasts. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over to Dan to wrap up with questions.
Great. Thanks, Heather. So if I don't get any questions, I'm just going to sit here and sing. And trust me, you do not want me to sit here and sing.
Oh, there are some questions in the queue if you just click on the Question Manager button.
Oh, there they are. Okay, perfect. Okay, first question here is, you specified many more features. What is the complete list of new features? Also, for Resource Governor, how do you specify if it's from application use this memory pool, if it's from Excel use another memory pool? Okay, two great questions. So there was a slide early on under Trends that had a list, an initial list of features for SQL Server 2008. That list isn't just manageability features. So at the end of this, you'll be able to print out a PDF of the presentation, and you can look at that list. Also, if you go out to Microsoft.com/SQL Server, there's some white papers and information about the features that are slated for 2008, and you can get a little more detail there. For Resource Governor, how to determine what application it's coming from and should it go to Pool 1 or Pool 2, there's metadata within the connection. And when you establish a connection with SQL Server, Excel does this automatically. It comes in with application name Excel. If you custom code an application and you do your connections, you can fill in that metadata in the connection information. Then in your user-defined function that's going to do the sorting of those connections, you have access to that metadata in the connection, so you can look for that application tag, and then you can set it to a particular group. All right, let's move along. Can declarative management manage to the LUN level? We use a lot of configurations where we use Veritas Volume Manager to mount a drive and then mount multiple volumes under that drive. Can declarative management manage to this level in a standalone and a clustered environment? That's an excellent question. I don't have an answer to that question. I'm not an expert on SANS, so I will, if you email me at dan.jones@microsoft.com, then I will get this question answered for you. Let's see, the next question is the text coloring also going to benefit from this new parser? I hope so. I haven't seen a recent demo of it. There was some text coloring in an earlier build of it, and it should carry forward. The IntelliSense isn't going to be in the CTP that's going to be announced shortly. It'll be in the one after that. So they're still making some final changes on that, but text coloring should be there. All right, can you give us a roadmap for all upcoming CTPs for SQL Server 2008 in the upcoming months? What features described in today's webcast are in the next upcoming CTP? So let me think about what I talked about today. So the June CTP is out there. That's available for download. The next CTP is going to be announced shortly. Dare I say this week? You know, I just probably jinxed it for sure. But it will be announced shortly. And then you could expect probably in the fall, maybe late September, early October timeframe, somewhere in there, sometime October, you could expect the following CTP. Declarative management is in the June CTP, so that's available now. All the other ones are going to be in the CTP that'll come out in the September, October timeframe. All right, how much time SQL Server 2008 can save as compared to SQL Server 2005 in terms of manageability? In a day-to-day scenario, for example, over 8 servers. Wow, that's a big question. There's so much complexity that goes into answering a question like that. Everybody's environment is a little bit different. Everybody's comfort level with administering that environment is a little bit different. So it kind of depends on your experience level. What I will tell you is you have tools now that you can control the configuration of the environment and monitor the configuration of the environment, and that's what declarative management is about. So you can set up your configuration, you can generate policies from that configuration, and you can set up prevention policies or monitoring policies. You don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to try to capture these configuration changes through code reviews or by happenstance. In terms of performance, you have Resource Governor that's hopefully going to be useful in your environment, so you can ensure that certain applications have the right set of resources available to them. all actions audited. If monitoring changes to the environment, so DML changes to the environment is critical to you, you now have a tool that does that for you out of box. So if you've written a custom solution that you're having to manage and make changes to, you don't have to do that any longer. Performance Studio, real-time monitoring. Previously or today, customers a lot of times, they'll either buy a third-party product or they'll use SQL Diag. SQL Diag is kind of an after-the-fact kind of thing. Oh, I saw this performance blip. Let me go turn on SQL Diag and hope it happens again, and I can capture that data as it comes across. With Performance Studio, you can set it up to just always monitor those key counters for you, store them in a warehouse, and monitor the trend. PowerShell, from a scriptability standpoint, if you like scripting, if you like doing shell scripting, this is just going to rock for you because you can do all your manageability in scripts. IntelliSense, that's just a quick time saver. So if you're always typing in the wrong thing, or you write out a long stored procedure or get a stored procedure from a developer and you're trying to run it and there's constantly errors as you inch through it, IntelliSense will be right there. Via PowerShell, will we finally easily be able to extract a table easily from a backup? Unfortunately, PowerShell doesn't make that any easier. I'm going to take this down as a note. PowerShell has this concept of commandlets, and they're little applications that you can pipe the output of PowerShell through and it can do something. For example, we could have a script commandlet where we could push a table through it and it would generate the script for the table. I'm going to take this down as feedback back to our PowerShell team and have them look at what kind of commandlet we could generate around backup. So maybe you could pass in a table and a backup file and have it extract the table from the backup file kind of in the background. So again, if you email me at dan.jones@microsoft.com, I will follow up with you. So let me just take a note on this. Backup, extract table, PowerShell. All right, how important do you feel it is to upgrade from SQL 2000 and 2005 to 2008? So this has been a pretty hot topic out there. I know Steve Jones at SQLServerCentral.com, no relation by the way, wrote an article a week or a couple of weeks ago about, if you're on 2000, wait for 2008. There's a number of factors that contribute to this. I've talked to customers who they have policies in their enterprise that they can't move to a new release of a product until SP1 or SP2 has shipped on that product. So they're just going to 2005 since we shipped to, SP2 several months ago. It kind of depends on your own environment. Also, when you look at the feature list of 2005, is there something there you want to take advantage of right away? So whether it's the SQL CLR or Service Broker or some of the new data types that are available there, if there's something you want to take advantage to right away, absolutely you should move. So it really becomes kind of a business decision at this point. The upgrade there's lots of literature out there on the upgrade from 2000 to 2005, so if you haven't made that leap, you should go out to Microsoft.com, do a search on that, go out to SQL Junkies, go out to SQL Server Central, and pull up some of the literature on what that upgrade is like. I will say that the upgrade from 2000 to 2008 is going to be very similar to the upgrade to 2005. Now, the upgrade from 2005 to 2008 should be a more straightforward upgrade. Just the amount of changes in the system is far fewer than it was between 2000 and 2005. So I wouldn't look at this at a technology level. I'd really look at it at a business level. From the business perspective, what's driving you there? Are there new features you need to take advantage of to enable new business scenarios? Or is it, we're fine on 2000. Our applications are running great. Let's wait for 2008. The other thing to keep in mind is that support on SQL Server 2000, mainstream support, runs out at the end of 2008. So if you don't like to jump to a release right away, you want people to kind of go test the waters for you, you may want to go to 2005 and then look at opening up the window of when you can jump to 2008 and not be forced because you're going to run out of mainstream support. All right, can there be a GUI for PowerShell, or we have to wait for it in SQL Server 2011? That's a great question. So with Exchange 2007, their model was they built PowerShell commandlets for everything, and then their UI used those commandlets. It was an interesting model, kind of trailblazing a little bit there. There were some good things that they did, and there were some hurdles that they had to overcome. Some of those they did well, some of those they didn't. I will say that in 2008, we are not going to connect the GUI to PowerShell. That's something we're going to look at in the future. We're getting some of the framework in place so that we're able to do that. So we're moving a lot of the logic out of the GUI in 2008. So new features that are coming in like declarative management, resource governor, all actions audited. We're pushing a lot of that logic down into the object model. So whether you're going through PowerShell and going against the object model or you're going through the GUI, you'll have the same experience. So you'll have validation of data before you commit. You'll have the business rules encapsulated there as well. Is there a public beta available? If you go up to connect.microsoft.com/SQL, you can download the June CTP. Right now, for us, CTPs and betas are almost identical. We go through a very rigorous process of getting code features moved into our mainline branch. There's a huge number of quality gates that they have to go through. And then from the main branch, when we release a CTP, we go through some rigorous testing. Every team in the building goes through rigorous testing, which is essentially beta level testing on the product. So I know Visual Studio has a slightly different definition of CTPs, which stands for Community Technology Previews. Their definition is they'll snap their main branch periodically. They just do some smoke tests on it to make sure that it's stable, and then they release it. We go through a much more rigorous quality inspection before we release it. So go grab the June CTP. It's very stable. I haven't heard any complaints of instability with it or wreaking havoc on environments. Now, I will note that uninstall is not supported on that, so you really want to bring up a virtual PC and slap it on there. Also, with declarative management in the June CTP, there was an issue with it. You can go out to the MSDN forums for 2008, or you can go to my blog, and you can find the fix for that problem in the June CTP for declarative management. SQL compression, any ratios that you can share, 75% reduction, 10% increase in time, etc. So yes, we're releasing compression in 2008. You'll be able to do, there's various configurations on the compression. I don't have numbers in front of me. A lot of it depends on the structure of your table, so what data types you're using in your table. Some data types compress better than other data types. In terms of what's the overhead of the compression? Again, there's a number of factors there. So how much data is compressed? What are the data types that are being compressed? And then what's the hardware you're running on? And what's the overhead of the hardware? Compression is a CPU-intensive operation, so it's going to run better on a faster proc with dual procs, etc., than it will on a slower clock machine with single procs. There is, with the data compression, there's a stored procedure that you can run with that feature where you tell it, these are my configuration parameters for compression, here's my table, and it will estimate a savings, a space savings for you. It is an estimate, so your mileage varies once you actually do enable it. You'll get your exact numbers. I don't think that will give you information on, and then what's the overhead to uncompress the data. Where can we find specifics on the infrastructure for the distribution of the policies? That's not available yet, and you're not going to see it until probably the September-October CTP. We are looking to do possibly a private CTP with some select customers. If you're interested in that, email me at dan.jones@microsoft.com. Give me your name, your company, your contact information, and I'll see about getting you on a private CTP. So this would be a great opportunity for you to try out the multi-server capabilities and give us feedback before we ship it. All right, what's an offer in SQL 2008 with regards to migrated databases, for instance, from 2000? I can see the features are ideal if developed with 2008 from scratch. The features that I demoed today and talked about today, probably the only one that would have any bearing on your application logic would be resource governor. and that would just be changing the way the metadata captured in the connection string. Otherwise, moving an application from 2000 to 2008, declarative management, you can make use of that. With declarative management, if you have an existing configuration, you can extract a policy or create a policy from that existing configuration and then put that policy into effect, whether it's prevention or monitoring. Resource governor, again, if you have visibility into the connection string for your application, you can enable that. All actions audited, you can enable that on your application. It doesn't require any change to your application code. Performance Studio, again, it's monitoring the performance aspects with T-SQL, performance counters, or DMV, so that's all available. PowerShell, there's no dependency on application logic, etc. So I see you could make use of all those manageability features on your application, just moving it from 2000 to 2008. Is PowerShell mapped to SMO, and can you have other webcasts expanding on individual features? So great suggestion on the other webcasts. We're definitely going to look into that and have those as time goes by. PowerShell is running right on top of SMO. So it's making use of all the SMO classes and all the properties on those classes. What I didn't show is you can list out all the properties on a particular object. That list is going to be a list of SMO properties. 2008, is it support for Unix OS? Great question. I think the answer is quick and simple. No. So Windows only. All right, so that was the last question. Heather, I guess at this time I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dan. I'd like to remind everyone to take a moment to fill out the survey prior to exiting the session room. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Dan Jones for today's presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.
Heather, there's two more